Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTG Traders. My name is Taryn, and this is Vona, Butcher of Magan, for Brawl. So while Dominaria spoilers continue to come out and Dominaria pre-release season and, set review season is coming up really soon, I'm going to make sure we just focus on the Brawl decks for right now until we get to Dominaria. So I don't want to make any kind of standard decks or any kind of modern decks until that set is entirely out, so I can start making full deck lists of that set. So just like the other Brawl decks on the channel here, this is Vona, Butcher of Magan. It's a 60-card singleton, which means we have one copy of each card in the deck list here that we can use as a commander deck, sort of, and use Vona, Butcher of Magan as our commander. Vona is a 5-mana 4/4 legendary creature Vampire Knight with Vigilance and Lifelink. That's already pretty fantastic, but we can tap it, pay 7 life, destroy target non-land permanent. Activate this ability only during your turn. So a sorcery speed removal spell for anything on the board besides lands. That's pretty awesome. So before I get into the full deck list here, make sure to like the video if you like it and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really does help us out, and I really appreciate it, of course. But let's get right into it right here. And of course, just like with the commander list, we have a nice slide for early game value just like this. Starting off with Duskborn Skymarcher. It's a 1-mana 1/1 vampire cleric with flying. We can pay 1, tap it, target attacking vampire gets +1/+1 until end of turn. This is decent because it's a great 1-mana 1/1 flyer, so a great 1-drop on turn 1, but it's also great because we can actually pump a lifelinker or maybe a death toucher or something else to hopefully trade with a creature on our opponent's side of the field. Moving on to another fantastic potential flyer, we actually have Skymarcher Aspirant, so 1 white mana 2/1 vampire soldier with Ascend. Ascend is, of course, when you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. This means the Skymarcher Aspirant has flying as long as you have the City's Blessing. So a 1-mana 2/1 is decent, but a 1-mana 2/1 flyer is amazing on the play. Next up here for us, we have another 1-drop, Vicious Conquistador. This is a 1-mana 1/2 vampire soldier. Whenever a Vicious Conquistador attacks, each opponent loses 1 life. So even if this creature does get blocked, Vicious Conquistador is still going to be doing damage to our opponent, which is just gravy for us. It's also just getting it for 2 points of damage on turn 2 as well if our opponent doesn't have a turn 1 play. That's very good too. Next up for us for the 2-drop slots, we have Adanto Vanguard, possibly one of the best vampires in Standard, and in Brawl, it's definitely a headache as well. It's a 2-mana 1/1 vampire soldier. As long as Adanto Vanguard is attacking, it gets +2/+0, so it's a 3/1 attacking it on turn 3. Pay 4 life, Adanto Vanguard gains indestructible until end of turn, so it's a very hard creature to get rid of on the play. It's a very hard creature to get rid of, especially if we have like life linking on top of Adanto Vanguard, because we can just pay the life, trade, and make sure we actually get our life back to where it is basically in balance. Moving on to some more 2-mana value here, we actually have Dusk Legion Zealot. It's a 2-mana 1/1 vampire soldier. When it enters a battlefield, we draw a card and lose 1 life. While this isn't necessarily that fantastic for us as being a 2-mana 1/1, drawing a card and losing 1 life is actually quite good for us. Losing 1 life, not so much, but drawing a card on turn 2 is amazing, especially for on the play, since we didn't get that first draw off of the turn 1 there. Next up for us, we have Famished Paladin, a fantastic, ridiculous card for us. Fantastic, ridiculous? Yes, why not? It's a 2-mana 3/3 Vampire Knight. Famished Paladin doesn't untap during your untap step. When you gain life, untap Famished Paladin. So getting a lifelink enchantment on top of this, or just getting life in general, does untap Famished Paladin. So attacking in for 3 points of damage on turn 3 is very good, and untapping it anytime we gain life is very good too. So if this has a lifelink enchantment on top of it, it's basically a 3/3 with Vigilance and lifelink, which is actually quite good. Moving on to another ridiculous 2-drop for us, we have Gifted Aetherborn. This is a 2-mana 2/3 lifelink Death Toucher, so we actually do gain some life here, so it can untap the Famished Paladin we just talked about, but it's also a Death Toucher, which means we can actually just kill straight up an opponent's creature on their side of the field, and that's very good for us as well. To kind of pump all of our board here, we actually have Legion Lieutenant. We can only have 1 of in the deck since this is a singleton Brawl format. This is a 2-mana 2/2 Vampire Knight. Other vampires you control get +1/+1, so Dusk Legion Zealot becoming a 2/2 instead of a 1/1 does make it quite good, and Famished Paladin becoming a 4/4 instead of a 3/3 is just insanity. Legion Lieutenant, I wish there was more of you in the format, but sadly you were the only one so far. Moving on though, we have Martyr of Dusk. This is a 2-mana 2/1 vampire soldier. When Martyr of Dusk dies, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. So I put this in here over a Metallic Mimic for this particular slot because of the lifelink here as well. I do like Metallic Mimic as well, and if you want to put that in the deck list, you can too. But I did think that Martyr of Dusk is important enough to put in here thanks to that 1/1 lifelinker being created from it. Moving on to some more mid-game utility here, we actually have, starting up, Oathsworn Vampire, another 2-drop. This is a 2-mana 2/2 Vampire Knight. Oathsworn Vampire enters the battlefield tapped, which is not amazing for us, but you may cast Oathsworn Vampire from your graveyard if you gained life this turn. So same thing here, and that's why the Martyr of Dusk is actually in here. We have the 1/1 lifelinker there. We have a lot of lifelink as well in the deck too, but having more of it in there is very good too. So Oathsworn Vampire, whenever we gain life, we can cast this from the graveyard on main phase 2. That's great, that's fantastic. It gives us a 2/2 or a 3/3 if we have Legion Lieutenant on the battlefield. Moving on to the 3-drops here, we have Exultant Skymarcher. This is a 3-mana 2/3 with flying. That's it. Very simple, very straightforward, but a 3-mana 2/3 with flying is not bad either. So very good on the curve, very good at attacking in the air. And of course, it is a 2/3 turning into a 3/4 if we have Legion Lieutenant on the battlefield. So that's pretty decent as well. Another card to help us too is Forerunner of the Legion. This is a 3-mana 2/2 Vampire Knight. And when Forerunner of the Legion enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a vampire card, reveal it, then shuffle your library and put that card on top of it. So this is going to be like, most of the time, it's going to be our big game-ending bombs, kind of hunting it out of our deck, which is very, very good for us. Whenever another vampire enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So this can be itself. This can be a creature that, if we have lots of vampires coming into the battlefield, can pump up a large flyer or just a large ground pounder and make sure we actually get on for game-ending damage or just kind of hopefully trade against a large creature. Moving on to some more utility for us, we have Mavrin Fane, Dusk Apostle. This is a 3-mana 2/2 legendary creature vampire cleric. Whenever one or more non-token vampires you control attacks, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. So we have 23 creatures in the deck. Mavrin Fane is going to most likely get off at least 1 or 2 attacks there, or not attacks, but at least 1 or 2 triggers to make sure we have 1/1, lifelinkers on the battlefield. If not, Mavrin Fane is going to die to removal, and that's perfectly fine. It's a huge threat and will definitely win you the game if opponent is not ready for it. Moving on to another decent flyer for us, we have Sadistic Skymarcher. This is a 3-mana 2/2 Vampire Soldier. As an additional cost to cast Sadistic Skymarcher, reveal a vampire card from your hand or pay 1 colorless. We want to make sure we reveal a vampire from our hand because we don't want to pay 4 mana for this, but it is a flying lifelinker, which is very good, again, getting the Oathsworn Vampire back onto the battlefield, as well as untapping Phantom's Paladin. And let's say we have a lot of flyers in the air, well, we can use Voracious Vampire here, a 3-mana 2/2 Vampire Knight with Menace, to give other vampires on the battlefield Menace. So when Voracious Vampire enters the battlefield, target vampire you control gets +1/+1 and gains Menace until end of turn. So it actually turns our Sadistic Skymarcher into a 3/3 with lifelink and flying and Menace, which is ridiculous, especially getting in for some lifelink damage. But that's it for 3-drops in the slot there. Let's go on to Bishop of Binding. This is our first 4-drop. It is a 4-mana 1/1 Vampire Cleric. When Bishop of Binding enters the battlefield, exile target creature and opponent controls until Bishop of Binding leaves the battlefield. Whenever Bishop of Binding attacks, target vampire gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the power of the exiled card. So if we're up against a dinosaur deck list or up against a larger creature-based deck list, we want to use Bishop of Binding here to make sure we grab a large creature, and that when we attack out with Bishop of Binding, we can either plus itself or plus another creature on the battlefield. Keep in mind though that if Bishop of Binding does die, that creature we exile does come back to our opponent's side of the field. So we want to make sure we have good removal on top of Bishop of Binding, but it's also just a decent exile card as well, just being a 4-mana exile creature, and if we don't want to attack with it, we don't have to. Another great 4-drop for us is Paladin of the Bloodstain, a 4-mana 3/2 Vampire Knight. When it enters the battlefield, we create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. So a 4-mana 3/2 that gives us another 1/1, that's okay, that's not too terrible, but I do like it a lot being in here, as it does make our board state a little bit wider. One thing I did think about here is that we do have quite a bit of lifelink already in the deck. We could replace Paladin of the Bloodstain with probably a Yahini Undying Partisan, something like that, maybe if you wanted to. I do like that in the 3-drop slot as well. We just don't have that much removal in the deck list here. So that's our mid-game utility. Let's move on to our in-game bombs. First up, we have Sanctum Seeker. This card is going to win the game by itself most of the time, or not really by itself. By the time it's on the battlefield, it's going to win the game. This is a 4-mana 3/4. Whenever a vampire you control attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. That's very, very good. That means our opponent is going to have a heck of a time coming back from this swing out when we have Sanctum Seeker on the battlefield. Moving on to another great creature for us, we have Twilight Prophet. This is a 4-mana 2/4 Vampire Cleric with flying, and of course Ascend. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have the City's Blessing, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. Each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is that card's converted mana cost. So this card is ridiculous. If this card starts to go off in a Brawl match, you can tell that it's basically already over. Another card to give really good utility for our entire board is the Anointed Deacon here. It's a 5-mana 3/3 Vampire Cleric. At the beginning of the combat on your turn, you may have target vampire get +2/+0 until end of turn. Anointed Deacon is ridiculous. It can also give +2/+0 to itself, making it a 5/3 attacking end. That's very good, but more often than not, we want to put that +2/+0 on a lifelink creature to make sure we get some lifelink as well. Moving on to another fantastic card first, we have Bishop of Rebirth. This is a 5-mana 3/4 Vampire Cleric with Vigilance, and whenever Bishop of Rebirth attacks, you may return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. So that might be Maverick Fane that actually died to a removal spell, or it might be a Dust Legion Zealot to grab some extra cards on the battlefield. Or it could be a Legion Lieutenant from the graveyard onto the battlefield, pumping our entire board. Another great card to bleed our opponent dry of life points is Bishop of Rebirth as well. It's a 5 mana 3/3 Vampire Cleric. Whenever it enters a battlefield, target opponent loses 1 life for each vampire you control. So we have 23, we have the possibility of making much more on the battlefield. Bishop of the Bloodstain here can hopefully help us drain our opponent to a GG here. And the last creature here in the main board is a Champion of Dusk. This is a 5 mana 4/4 Vampire Knight. When Champion of Dusk enters a battlefield, draw X cards, and you lose X life, where X is the number of vampires you control. So I like Champion of Dusk here because it basically gives us a full set of cards into our hand, especially if you have a wide board state. If we do not, Champion of Dusk just gives a 4/4 on the battlefield. We lose 1 life, we draw 1 card, basically like a larger version of Dust Legion Zealot. Not too terrible, but of course if we have more vampires on the battlefield, Champion of Dusk is going to hopefully give us a ton of more gas to hopefully win against our opponent. So that's it for creatures. Let's move on to basically our just slight removal here. I did have a Fatal Push in this specific spot here for a while, but I did put Moment of Craving over it because I do like the life link here, or life gain rather. It's a 2 mana instant. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn, and you gain 2 life. That's going to most likely kill anything we want to kill with a Fatal Push. Not necessarily, obviously, since a Fatal Push can basically just be, unconditional removal for a 4 mana creature, but Moment of Craving is nice for us as it can help us trade as well as gain some life in the side. Moving on to another great card for us, we have Settle the Wreckage here. It's a 4 mana instant. Exile all attacking creatures target player controls. That player may search his or her library for that many basic lands, put those lands on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle his or her library. So if they have a wide board state with lots of creatures and we just give them mana with that, that's a really nice trade-off for us. That's going to help us hopefully win on that next turn, or make sure that we can actually hold off for a bigger swing in the following turns. I do like a board-wide Path to Exile. It's very, very nice. And last up we have Vraska's Contempt. This is a 4 mana instant. Exile target creature or planeswalker. You gain 2 life. Very simple, very straightforward. And of course, if our opponent is playing a planeswalker, we want to make sure we get it out on the battlefield and into exile. Now, if it is their commander, it just goes to the command zone, which is not too bad, and we do gain 2 life as well. So that's our basic removal here. Let's move on to our enchantments and artifacts, starting with Legion's Landing. You know it's in here. It's a 1 mana legendary enchantment. When Legion's Landing enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. Whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, transform Legion's Landing. And of course, it turns into Adanto, the first fort. And that can add 1 white mana to our mana pool since it is a land, or we can pay 3, tap it, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. Moving on to some more great pumping here, we actually have Radiant Destiny. It's a 3 mana enchantment with Ascend. As Radiant Destiny enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control, the chosen type, get +1/+1, which is of course vampire. And as long as you have the City's Blessing, they also have Vigilance, which is really, really good for us too. So those 1/1s with lifelink are turning into 2/2s with lifelink and Vigilance. That's awesome. That's amazing. Radiant Destiny is going to be a great win con for us as well. Another card to hopefully make our board state a little bit wider, as well as giving us some lifelink. We have Squire's Devotion here. It's a 3 mana enchantment. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. And of course, when Squire's Devotion enters the battlefield, we create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink as well. So we make something bigger, and of course we get a 1/1 with lifelink as well. So very, very good on the curve. For some more exile hate here, we have Cast Out, a 4 mana enchantment with flash. When Cast Out enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls until Cast Out leaves the battlefield. We can pay cycling for 1 white mana. Cycling, of course, means we can discard this card and draw a new card if we need to in the early game, which more often than not we're going to hopefully keep on to or hold on to as long as possible. And moving on to the last card in here besides artifacts, we have Ixalan's Binding, a 4 mana enchantment. When Ixalan's Binding enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls until Ixalan's Binding leaves the battlefield, so basically like Cast Out. However, your opponent can't cast spells with the name as the same exiled card. Now, since this is Brawl, the secondary ability for Ixalan's Binding is actually not going to be that important to us, since it's a singleton format. There's only 1 copy of each card in their entire deck, so if we Ixalan's Binding something, we already know that they're not going to be able to recast it again, so it's basically just another Cast Out for us, which is not too bad. Moving on to our artifacts, though, we have Bantu's Monument, a 3 mana legendary artifact. Black creature spells you cast cost 1 colorless less to cast, and whenever you cast a creature spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life, so a great little life loss, life gain there, bringing back Oathsworn Vampire, hopefully from the graveyard, or untapping, of course, our Famished Paladin as well. Moving on to another monument, we have Oketra's Monument here, the black and white monuments together in the same deck. This is a 3 mana legendary artifact. White creatures you control cost 1 colorless less to cast, which is very good, and whenever we cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 white warrior creature token with Vigilance. Vigilance. So this actually makes our board state a lot wider as well as making creatures that have white mana in their mana cost a little bit cheaper as well. Moving on to another great pump spell for us, we have Vanquisher's Banner here, a 5-mana artifact. As Vanquisher's Banner enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. We want to choose vampires. Creatures you control the chosen type get +1/+1, so fantastic already. And whenever you cast a creature spell of the chosen type, draw a card. So our entire deck list here is vampires. So if we have a Vanquisher's Banner on the battlefield, we can start drawing cards like mad, especially if we get into creature after creature after creature. And the last card in here besides the lands, we actually have Immortal Sun. This is a 6-mana legendary artifact. Players can't activate Planeswalker loyalty abilities, which is great, especially in the Brawl format, especially if their actual commander is a Planeswalker. So this actually shuts down the Planeswalkers in general. At the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card. So we're drawing 2 extra cards, which is already very good as well. Spells you cast cost 1 colorless less to cast, which is again very, very good. And creatures you control get +1/+1. So it's doing so many good things for 6 mana. I love this card. This is going to hopefully win the game for you. But that is it besides lands here. Let's move on to lands. We have starting up, of course, with Field of Ruin, a great card for us, hopefully destroying a flipped Legion's Landing on our opponent's side of the field. We can tap it to add colorless or pay 2, tap it, sacrifice Field of Ruin, destroy target non-basic land and opponent controls. Each player searches his or her library for a basic land card, put that onto the battlefield, then shuffle his or her library. So that is an untapped land as well, so if we have a follow-up spell, we can actually use it too. Very good for us. For Unclaimed Territory here, this is of course because we have a vampire deck list. This is coming in, choosing a creature type, we're going to choose vampire. We tap it for colorless, or we can tap it, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, spend this mana only to cast creature spells of the chosen type. So this is not that useful for spells and enchantments for us, but it is useful for casting vampire creatures for us, which is nice. Moving on to If Near Deadlands, this is just a decent, kind of removal spell for us. Tapping for colors, pay 1, add black to our mana pool, or we can pay for, tap it, sacrifice a desert, put 2 -1/-1 counters on a target creature and opponent controls, activate this ability only anytime you can cast a sorcery. So very good for us, just a decent removal spell. And we also have a few deserts in the actual deck list here, so If Near Deadlands doesn't have to sacrifice to itself. Moving on to a white-black land here, we have Concealed Courtyard, just a fast land coming in, tapping for white or black. Then Shefet Dunes here, another desert for us, tapping for colorless. We can pay 1 life, add white to our mana pool, or we can pay 4, sacrifice a desert. Creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Activate this ability only anytime you can cast a sorcery. So this is a great board-wide pump for our creatures, being able to get in for some real points of damage, hopefully closing out the match there. Moving on to another desert, this is Desert of the Glorified. It comes in tapped, we can tap for black mana, and we can pay 2 mana and cycle it, which is not bad. Of course, we can sack this to a Shefet Dunes or an If Near Deadlands. Another desert we can sacrifice to those cards as well is Desert of the True, doing the same thing, coming in tapped, tapping for white mana, and we can pay 2 to cycle it as well. Another great card for us is Evolving Wilds, just very simple, hopefully thinning our deck, getting a mana we need onto the battlefield. And the last 2 land types in here, of course, are 8 Plains and 8 Swamp. And that is the full deck list here. Let's go to the full deck list on the layout. On MTG Traders is coming to a ridiculous 28 tickets. Again, Brawl is so cheap, it's insane. I really love these deck lists. And in paper, if you want to build this, it's just at 83 bucks. The big money cards, of course, coming from Vraska's Contempt, Settle the Wreckage, Legion's Landing, the Immortal Sun, and Twilight Prophet. Concealed Courtyard and Field of Ruin are also coming up in price a little bit in the paper realm, but I do think if you want to play this deck list, definitely try it out when Dominaria hits on MTGO, because Brawl is a format that I really do like, and I really hope you guys enjoy it as well. But of course, that's it for the video, guys. Let me know what you think. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you have any suggestions for it down below? I know Yahini Undying Partisan could have been a card I could have included in here easily, so let me know if you want that card as well in the deck. I do want to probably rebuild some of these Brawl decks when Dominaria does release. There are so many great cards in Dominaria, it's kind of insane. Dominaria is basically like, Commander Light, but for Brawl, of course, in the actual standard format. It's just so much fun. I can't wait to kind of play with those cards in the future, and I can't wait for that set to come out. But that's going to do it for the video, guys. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.